She walked into my house like she already owned it. That was the first thing I noticed about Melissa. Not her smile, though she had one of those wide, practiced smiles that people spend years perfecting. Not her dress, though it probably cost more than my first car. It was the way she moved through my living room that Thanksgiving afternoon, picking up picture frames, setting them back down, touching things that weren't hers to touch. My son Marcus stood behind her with that look on his face, the one I hadn't seen since he was 9 years old and had broken my workshop window, and hadn't figured out yet how to tell me. I should have trusted that look. Marcus was 34. He'd built his own accounting firm from nothing, worked 12-hour days for 6 years straight, lived in a studio apartment until he could afford something decent. He was the kind of man who kept receipts, who read contracts before signing them, who called me every Sunday at 7 in the evening regardless of where he was in the world. He was not a careless person. That's why I should have asked more questions when Melissa appeared. She'd come into his life 8 months before that Thanksgiving. He mentioned her casually at first. Met someone, Dad. She's great. You like her, the way you'd mention a good restaurant you tried. By month 3, it was she moved in, Dad. It just made sense. By month 6, it was I think she might be the one. I didn't push. He was a grown man. And when she finally came to Thanksgiving that year, I told myself I'd keep an open mind. She sat at my dining room table, the one Eleanor and I had bought at an estate sale in 1987, and refinished ourselves over one long weekend, and she looked around the room like she was calculating square footage. "It's cozy," she said, which is what people say when they mean small. Marcus passed her the sweet potatoes. She declined. Gluten. I passed her the green beans. She declined. Pesticides. She ate approximately 4 bites of turkey and spent the rest of the meal on her phone. I caught Marcus watching her, then watching me watching her, and he gave me the smallest shake of his head. "Not now, Dad." So I talked about football. I talked about the neighbor's new fence. I talked about the snow they were predicting for December. Melissa contributed nothing except a few comments about a yoga retreat in Sedona she was considering, and something about a juice cleanse she was starting Monday. After she excused herself to use the bathroom and was gone for nearly 20 minutes, Marcus leaned across the table and said very quietly, "She means well, Dad." I didn't say anything, I said. You didn't have to. He was right. I hadn't said a word. But I'd been a father for 34 years, and I'd been a husband for 38 until Eleanor passed. And I knew what it looked like when a man was trying to convince himself of something. I let it go. The holidays came and went. Marcus called every Sunday. He sounded tired in a way that wasn't about work. Then February came. He called on a Tuesday, which he never did, and his voice was off, too casual, the way people get when they're practicing being casual. He said Melissa had brought something up, something she'd been thinking about for a while, something about their future. She wanted to get married. I said that was wonderful. He said she had some ideas about the wedding. I said that was also wonderful. He said she was thinking destination, Italy maybe, or the south of France. She had a planner she liked. The planner had a vision. The vision involved a venue deposit of $80,000 just to hold the date. I was quiet for a moment. $80,000 to hold the date, I said, not to book it, to hold it. It's a very popular venue, Marcus said, in the voice of someone who doesn't believe what he's saying. I asked him how much the whole thing was looking like. There was a long pause, long enough that I walked from the kitchen to the living room, sat down in my chair, and waited. "She's put together a budget," he said finally. "It's around $400,000. I'd retired 2 years prior after 31 years as a civil engineer. I was comfortable. I was not $400,000 for a party comfortable." "Marcus," I said. "I know, Dad. What does she make?" Another pause. "She's between things right now." "Between things." "She had a consulting business. It's been slow." I didn't ask what she consulted on. I'd asked before, and the answer was always slightly different. Brand strategy, lifestyle design, wellness consulting. It changed the way weather changes, frequently and without much warning. "Is she expecting you to cover this?" I asked. "We're figuring it out," he said. She thought maybe she wanted to ask if you might want to contribute. As a gift. How much of a gift? The pause this time was the longest yet. She was thinking $150,000. I set the phone down on my knee for a second. Just for a second. Tell her I'd like to meet, I said. The three of us. Dinner. We met the following Saturday at a restaurant Melissa chose. A place downtown where the menu had no prices and the portions were the size of a deck of cards. She showed up 15 minutes late in a white coat that I later learned cost $4,000. I know because Marcus told me without meaning to months later when he was telling me other things. She ordered a glass of champagne before sitting down. She kissed Marcus on the cheek. She smiled at me with all those practiced teeth. "Walter, it's so wonderful to finally do this," she said, reaching across and touching my hand. I let her. "Marcus says you've been very supportive of our relationship," she said. "I love my son," I said. "That's so beautiful." She squeezed my hand once and released it. "Family is everything to me, too. That's actually part of why the wedding is so important. My family has always celebrated milestones the right way. My parents' anniversary parties, my sister's wedding, these things matter. They're a legacy." I nodded. I ordered water. She talked for about 20 minutes about the wedding, the venue in Tuscany, the florist who only worked with seasonal blooms, the photographer who had shot 3 celebrity weddings, the guest list, 240 people, which struck me as remarkable given that in 8 months I had not met a single friend of hers. Then she set her champagne glass down and looked at me directly. "I know Marcus spoke with you about the financial piece," she said. "I just want you to know how meaningful it would be. A father's contribution to his son's wedding. It becomes part of the story. Something you'll tell for the rest of your life." I look at her for a long moment. "Which part of the $150,000 becomes a story?" I asked. She smiled. "All of it." I look at Marcus. He was looking at the table. I reached into my jacket pocket and set a pen down on the white tablecloth between us. "Tell me about your consulting work," I said. Something shifted behind her eyes. Just a flicker. "Oh, I'm in a transition period right now." "Before the transition, when the business was active, what were your clients paying you?" "It varied." "Ballpark." Marcus looked up at me. I didn't look back at him. I kept my eyes on Melissa. "Between projects, it's hard to say." "Melissa," I said, and I used the voice I used for 31 years when a structural calculation didn't add up. Quiet. Exact. "My son makes good money. I know what he earns. I know what his firm brought in last year. I also know that since you moved in, he's been making ATM withdrawals he didn't used to make, and his discretionary spending has tripled. I'm not a detective. I'm a retired engineer. But I know when something doesn't load bear." The table was very quiet. "Now," I said, "I'd like to hear about the consulting." She excused herself to use the bathroom. She was gone 11 minutes. I counted. When she came back, the warmth was still there, but it had gone slightly rigid, the way things get when they're working to stay a certain shape. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said. "I'm not asking you to audit me. This is a conversation about family." "It is," I agreed. "That's exactly what it is." We ate dinner. Or rather, Marcus and I ate dinner. She moved food around her plate and checked her phone twice. When the bill came, she reached for her bag in the way of someone who is very confident the gesture won't be taken up. It wasn't. Marcus paid. In the parking lot, Marcus hugged me good night. He held on a second longer than usual. I almost said something. Instead, I said, "Call me this week." He said he would. He called Thursday. He sounded worse than usual. Not tired now, but something tighter than that. I asked if he was okay. He said yes. I asked again. He said, "She's upset about dinner." What specifically upset her? She felt interrogated. I asked about her work. Dad. Marcus. A long pause. "She has some debts," he said. "From before. The consulting, it didn't. It wasn't as successful as she made it sound. There are some credit cards, some personal loans. She was hoping with the wedding that it would give her a fresh start. I sat down. How much debt? I asked. I don't know exactly. Does she know exactly? Silence. Marcus, son, I need you to listen to me. I picked my words the way I picked measurements. Carefully, no rounding. What she's describing isn't a fresh start. A fresh start is getting a job, paying things down, building something real. What she's describing is using your money and my money to clear her debts while calling it a wedding. She loves me. Maybe she does, I said, but a person who loves you doesn't come to your father with a payment request before they've been in your life a year. He was quiet for a long time. I need to think, he said. Take all the time you need, I said. But while you're thinking, I want you to do one thing. I want you to pull the last 6 months of your joint spending, whatever accounts you share, and look at it. Line by line. Can you do that? He said he'd try. He called back in 4 days. His voice was different this time, flatter, controlled in the way that means something is being held very tightly underneath. I looked at the accounts, he said. I waited. There were transfers I didn't recognize. Small ones at first, 200 here, 350 there. I thought they were subscriptions, but they were going to a Venmo account I don't have access to. He stopped. Over 6 months, it's $63,000, Dad. I had been standing at my kitchen window watching the bird feeder. A cardinal was sitting on the edge of it, not eating, just sitting. I watched it for a few seconds. Does she know you found this? I asked. Not yet. Good. Don't tell her yet. Can you come over Saturday? He came Saturday morning. He looked like he hadn't slept properly in days, which I suspected was true. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table where he'd done homework for 12 years, and spread out the statements. $63,420 moved in increments small enough not to trigger a notification, across a span of 26 weeks. There's more, he said. He pulled out his phone and showed me a text thread. Melissa, writing to someone named Tyler, who as far as Marcus could tell was a man she'd dated before him, a man she'd described to Marcus as a brief, unimportant thing from years ago. The texts told a different story. They'd been ongoing. They talked about Marcus by name. Tyler had asked in one message from October how much longer. Melissa had responded, working on it. I read it twice. When did you find this? I asked. Wednesday night. She left her phone on the counter. Have you talked to anyone else about this? A lawyer? He shook his head. I got up and poured us both coffee. I set his down in front of him and sat back down and looked at my son. This man who had stayed up until 2 a.m. in college to get his financial modeling right, who had built something real out of nothing, who called every Sunday at 7. And I thought about Eleanor, who would have known about Melissa within 15 minutes of meeting her, and who I wished very much was sitting at this table with us. Okay, I said, here's what we're going to do. The first call I made was to my attorney, a woman named Sandra Kowalski I'd worked with during a property dispute 8 years prior. I laid out the situation. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I like about her. When I finished, she said, the transfers are potentially criminal depending on how the accounts were set up. If she had authorized access, it's civil. If she didn't, or if access was obtained deceptively, you're looking at possible fraud. She told us to document everything. Marcus spent that weekend doing exactly that. Every statement, every Venmo record, every text, printed and organized with the same precision he brought to every audit he'd ever run. The second call was to a private investigator my attorney recommended. Within 2 weeks, he'd turned up something I hadn't anticipated. Melissa had done this before. Not identically, but the shape of it was the same. Another man, another city, another relationship that lasted about a year and ended when money stopped moving in her direction. The previous man had ultimately not pressed charges. He'd been embarrassed. He'd wanted it to be over. Marcus was not going to be embarrassed. He moved her belongings to storage while she was out of town for a weekend. He had the locks changed. He had Sandra send her a letter, It outlined in the careful language of someone who had looked at everything and found it all, what had been discovered and what was being pursued. Melissa called Marcus 14 times the day she received that letter. He didn't answer. She sent messages, first hurt, then angry, then reasonable, then angry again. She had explanations. The transfers were misunderstanding. The Venmo account was for savings. Tyler was just a friend. She had been planning to tell him everything. Then her attorney contacted Sandra and the explanation stopped. It took 8 months to resolve. She repaid $61,000 of the $63,000. The remainder was absorbed in legal costs and signed an agreement that precluded her from contesting certain terms. There was no criminal proceeding at Marcus's choice. He said he didn't want the years it would take. He wanted it finished. On the Sunday after it was all finalized, he called at 7, right on time. He sounded like himself for the first time in about a year. Not happy, exactly, not yet, but like himself. Grounded, clear. "I keep thinking about Thanksgiving," he said. "The way she looked at your house." "Like she was calculating square footage," I said. He was quiet for a second. "How did you know?" "Your face," I said. "You had the same look you had when you were 9 and you broke my workshop window." He laughed. Actually laughed. The real one, not the managed version he'd been using for the past several months. "Why didn't you say something?" he asked. "You were a grown man figuring something out," I said. "I wasn't going to get there before you did. You got there faster." "I had more runway," I said. 63 years is a lot of runway. He called the following Sunday, too, and the one after that. Every Sunday at 7, same as always. Some things I have learned you cannot protect your children from entirely. You can build the sturdiest structure you know how to build, account for every load, check every joint, and life will still find the gap you missed. You can prevent all of it. What you can do is be the person they call when it gives way. Be steady. Be there. Do the math when the math needs doing. That's all a father can do. That's enough. I still think about that cardinal sometimes. The one sitting on the edge of my bird feeder the morning Marcus told me about the $63,000. Just sitting there, not eating, not moving. Like it was waiting to see what I'd do next. I've had a long time to sit with what happened. And the clearest thing I can tell you is this. What Melissa did wasn't complicated. It was ordinary. People who take things that don't belong to them rarely have elaborate reasons. They just want what they want, and they've decided the wanting is enough justification. The complexity was never in her. It was in my son, who was a good man, and who made the mistake that good people most often make. He trusted someone because he wanted to believe the best of her. That's not a flaw. But it is a gap, and gaps get found. Marcus is sharp. Anyone who's built a firm from scratch at 34 is sharp. But intelligence without judgment is just processing speed. What got him wasn't that he failed to run the numbers. It's that he ran them on everything except the person sleeping in his house. He trusted the relationship the way you trust a load-bearing wall you've never actually inspected. You assume it's solid until the day it isn't. That's the thing I keep coming back to. Not the money. $63,000 is recoverable. What I think about is the look on his face when he sat at my kitchen table with those statements spread out in front of him. Not angry. Not even surprised, really. Just tired. The look of someone who's been carrying a weight they couldn't name, and they finally set it down, and they're not sure whether to feel relieved or ashamed that it took this long. He had nothing to be ashamed of, but I understood the feeling. What I admire most about Marcus, and I don't say this lightly because I've watched him his whole life, is what he did after. He didn't collapse. He didn't bargain. He didn't answer her 14 calls or read her explanations or let the part of him that still wanted it to be different override the part of him that knew exactly what he'd seen. He made a decision, and he held to it, and he did the work to close it out properly. That takes something. It takes the kind of steadiness that can't be borrowed or faked. You either have it or you don't, and when the situation required it, my son had it. I think about what I could have done differently. Maybe pushed earlier. Asked harder questions at Thanksgiving instead of letting it go for months. But I've made peace with that. You can't protect your children from every person who comes through the door with a good smile and bad intentions. What you can do is be someone they trust enough to call when the numbers stop adding up. Be someone they know will sit across the table and help them see clearly without making them feel foolish for having been fooled. The thing Melissa never understood, the thing people like her never seem to understand, is that actions have a way of compounding, same as interest. Every small transfer, every careful misdirection, every practiced smile added to a total she couldn't keep hidden forever. She built something, just not what she intended to build. She built a case. Marcus rebuilt. He's doing well now. He calls every Sunday at 7. That's enough for me. That has always been enough.